Let me ask you an honest question. How many times have you been explaining something important? At work, at home, or in a relationship, and someone suddenly started talking over you? Not interrupting politely, not waiting for a pause, just speaking louder, faster, as if what you were saying didn't matter. And in that moment, you felt it, that tight feeling in your chest, that flash of irritation, sometimes even a wave of embarrassment. But instead of responding, you froze, or you rushed your words, or you tried to compete, only to sound emotional, and eventually you stopped talking. Later, alone, you replay the scene in your mind, thinking, why didn't I say something? Why do I always shut down when this happens? If this feels familiar, I want you to hear something important right now. Being interrupted repeatedly is not just about bad manners. Very often, it's a subtle form of social dominance. And today, I'm going to show you how to respond in a way that is calm, firm, and psychologically intelligent, so you don't lose your voice, you don't lose your presence, and you don't lose yourself trying to be nice. And stay with me until the end, because I'm going to give you one simple sentence that immediately shifts the dynamic. When someone keeps talking over you, most women never use it, and it changes everything. Before we go deeper, if you're building a calmer, more confident inner life, make sure you're subscribed to Emotional Growth. This space is for women who are done shrinking in conversations and ready to take up space without becoming aggressive or disconnected from who they are. Now let me ask you something. When someone talks over you, do you usually go quiet? Do you speed up your words, trying to finish fast? Do you get louder, then regret it later? Or do you mentally check out, even while still sitting there? Just notice your answer. Because what you do in that moment isn't random. It's a pattern, and it's wired into your nervous system. Here's something most people never explain. When someone talks over you, your reaction is not just emotional, it's biological. The moment your voice is cut off, your brain reads it as a threat to your social position. Your limbic system activates instantly. Stress hormones begin to rise. Your body prepares to protect itself. That's why your chest tightens. That's why your thoughts scatter. That's why words suddenly disappear. This isn't weakness. It's a psychobiological response. Your nervous system learned, somewhere along the way, that being interrupted means danger, loss of respect, loss of control, loss of safety. So it reacts before your logic can catch up. Have you ever noticed your mind going completely blank, right when you need to speak? Have you ever felt your throat tighten, as if your voice physically couldn't come out? Have you ever started explaining too much, over-justifying, hoping the other person would finally let you finish? That's not because you don't know what to say. It's because your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for clear thinking and decision-making, temporarily goes offline. When stress levels rise too fast, cortisol floods your system, and your brain shifts into survival mode. In survival mode, the goal is not expression. The goal is protection. So your body chooses one of three familiar paths: freeze, rush, or retreat. And here's something many women don't realize. This response often didn't start in adulthood. It started in environments where being interrupted was normal, where speaking up wasn't encouraged, where finishing a thought required permission. So your nervous system learned to wait, to scan faces, to measure safety before finishing a sentence. That means when someone talks over you today, your body isn't only reacting to what's happening now. It's reacting to memory, not as a clear story, but as a sensation, a tightening, a hesitation, a sudden urge to disappear. This is why the reaction feels so automatic, so fast, so hard to control, because it was practiced for years. And when a response has been practiced long enough, the brain stops questioning it. It just executes it. And if this pattern has happened repeatedly in your life, your brain has strengthened this response over time. Neural pathways form through repetition, not through intention. That's why telling yourself, "Next time I'll speak up," often doesn't work, because the moment arrives, and your body reacts faster than your plan. Let me ask you something important. Have you ever blamed your personality for this? Have you ever thought, "I'm just not assertive," "I'm too sensitive," or "I'm bad at confrontation"? Here's the truth. This has very little to do with personality. It has to do with learned cognitive and behavioral patterns stored in your nervous system. And the good news is this: what was learned can be relearned. Neuroplasticity allows the brain to build new pathways. When we respond differently, consistently, not aggressively, not emotionally, but deliberately, and that's what we're doing here. Because the goal isn't to dominate the conversation. The goal is to stay present, without losing your center. In the next part, I'm going to show you the most common reaction women have when someone talks over them, and why that reaction quietly works against you. Most people think it makes them stronger. It doesn't. When someone talks over you, your first impulse is understandable. You want to react. You want to speak faster. You want to raise your voice. You want to interrupt back, just to reclaim your space. Sometimes it comes out as sarcasm, sometimes as sharpness, sometimes as urgency. And in the moment, it feels like strength. But here's the problem. That reaction works against you. In most social environments, work meetings, family discussions, even intimate relationships, the first person who escalates emotionally is rarely perceived as powerful. They're perceived as reactive. The focus quietly shifts, not to what you were saying, but to how you're saying it. Your message loses weight. Your presence feels unstable. And without meaning to, you enter a competition you didn't choose. A competition for volume, for speed, for dominance. But authority is not created through noise. Authority is created through regulation. Here's something important to understand. When you raise your voice, your cortisol levels increase even more. Your thinking narrows. Your language becomes less precise. Your tone carries tension. Other people feel that, even if they can't explain it. Have you ever left a conversation thinking, I shouldn't have reacted like that? Even though you were right. That's because your nervous system was trying to protect you, not represent you. And this is why so many women walk away from these moments, feeling frustrated with themselves, not because they were wrong, but because they didn't feel aligned. You replay the conversation later. You think of better words, better timing, a calmer response, and the regret isn't about what you said. It's about what you didn't say. That quiet self-betrayal. That's what slowly erodes confidence over time. Not the interruption itself, but the habit of abandoning yourself to keep the peace. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment you fight for the floor, you accept the frame that the other person set. A frame of competition. And in competition, someone always loses. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed that the people who are most respected in a room rarely speak the loudest? They speak the steadiest. They don't rush. They don't interrupt back. They don't scramble to be heard. They hold their pace. And that steadiness sends a powerful signal to the social brain. It says, I'm not threatened. I don't need to fight to exist. I'm grounded here. And that signal changes the entire dynamic. In the next part, I'm going to show you a deceptively simple strategy that allows you to keep your authority without raising your voice at all. It looks almost passive, but psychologically, it's one of the strongest moves you can make. Now let's talk about a strategy that looks simple on the surface, but is extremely powerful underneath. When someone starts talking over you, you don't stop. You don't rush. You don't speed up. You don't raise your voice. You keep speaking, exactly the way you were speaking before. Same pace, same tone, same rhythm. And I know what you might be thinking right now. But if I don't react, won't they just keep going? Here's what actually happens. By staying steady, you create a clear contrast. You appear calm, centered, in control, and the other person appears intrusive, disruptive, unregulated, without you accusing them of anything. Human brains are constantly scanning for stability, especially in group settings, and the person who stays regulated is perceived as more competent, more trustworthy, more authoritative. This isn't about dominance. It's about presence. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that when someone remains calm under pressure, the room naturally adjusts? People slow down. Attention shifts. The energy changes. That's not accidental. A steady voice sends a powerful message to the nervous systems around you. There's no emergency here. There's no need to escalate. And when your voice stays even, your own stress response begins to settle as well. Your breathing stays deeper. Your thinking stays clearer. Your words land with more weight. This is how you keep your prefrontal cortex online, instead of being hijacked by stress. And over time, this response rewires your brain. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. Each time you stay steady instead of rushing, your nervous system learns a new rule. I can stay present and safe at the same time. That's neuroplasticity in action. Now, this doesn't mean you let someone bulldoze you forever. If the person keeps talking over you, you move to the next step. And this next tool works so quickly because it taps directly into how human attention functions. Most people don't use it, and once you hear it, you'll understand why it's so effective. Now let's talk about what to do when staying steady isn't enough, because sometimes the person just keeps going. They don't pause. They don't notice. They don't yield the space. This is where you use a tool that works directly with how the human brain processes attention. You say their name. That's it. Not loudly. Not sharply. Not with irritation. Just their name. Clear, calm, and grounded. Why does this work so well? Because the brain is biologically wired to respond to its own name. Even in noisy environments, even in divided attention, hearing your name instantly pulls focus. So when someone is talking over you, you say, Mark, Jessica, David, and then you pause, just a beat, long enough for their attention to land. This pause is important. It's not dramatic. It's not confrontational. It simply creates space. Let me ask you something. Can you feel the difference between yelling hey and calmly saying someone's name? One triggers defensiveness. The other triggers awareness. Many women hesitate here because they worry about being seen as rude, especially in professional settings, or with family, or with a partner they don't want to upset. But using someone's name is not disrespectful. It's orienting. It gently brings the interaction back to balance. And when it's done calmly, it signals maturity, not confrontation. This works in meetings, at the dinner table, and even in intimate conversations, because clarity feels safer to the nervous system than silent resentment. And here's a detail that matters deeply. Your tone must carry certainty, not offense. You're not asking permission. You're signaling presence. When done correctly, most people stop talking automatically. And in that brief window of attention, you move to the next step. But this is where many women go wrong. They attack the person. They say things like, "You're rude. You never listen. You always do this." And the moment that happens, the conversation shifts into a personal conflict. That's not what you want. What you want is clarity. So in the next part, I'm going to show you exactly how to name the problem without attacking the person, in a way that makes the behavior visible, hard to deny, and much more likely to change. This is one of the most important parts of the entire process. This is where your response becomes truly powerful. Once you have the person's attention, you don't attack who they are. You don't label them. You don't criticize their personality. You don't make it emotional. You name the behavior. Calmly, clearly, directly. For example, when you talk over me, I lose my train of thought. I can't finish my point if I'm being interrupted. Let me complete the sentence. Then I want to hear you. Notice what's happening here. You're not accusing. You're not shaming. You're describing something observable. This matters because the brain responds very differently to behavioral clarity than to personal judgment. When you say, "You're rude," the other person's nervous system goes into defense. But when you say, "When you speak over me," the conversation stops being productive. You shift the focus away from emotion and toward reality. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to argue with a simple description of what's happening? You're not debating intentions. You're naming impact, and that reduces resistance. Let me show you the difference. This creates conflict. You always interrupt me. This creates clarity. When you interrupt me, I lose my train of thought. One attacks identity. The other names behavior. And the nervous system responds very differently to each. Behavior can be adjusted. Identity feels threatened. That's why this distinction matters so much. You're not trying to win. You're trying to stay present. And presence grows when your words are clean, specific, and grounded in reality. This is how boundaries stay calm, instead of emotional. This is how respect grows, without raising your voice. This approach also protects your own emotional balance. Instead of suppressing frustration, or exploding with it, you channel it into structure. That keeps your stress response lower. Your breathing stays steady. Your voice stays grounded. Your thinking stays clear. This is where your prefrontal cortex stays engaged, instead of being overridden by emotional stress. And something else important happens here. You begin to change the relational pattern. Because relationships are shaped by repetition. If every time someone interrupts you, you quietly disappear, the pattern becomes, your voice yields. But if every time someone interrupts you, you calmly name the behavior, a new pattern forms, one where your voice holds its place. This is not aggression. This is self-respect in action. And over time, this consistency reshapes how others interact with you. Now, there's a truth that can feel uncomfortable at first, but once you see it, it becomes incredibly freeing. In the next part, we're going to talk about how tolerance teaches people, what they can do with you, and why delaying boundaries quietly trains disrespect. Here's a truth that can feel uncomfortable at first, but becomes incredibly freeing once you understand it. People learn how to treat you by watching what you tolerate. Let that land for a moment. People learn how to treat you by watching what you allow to pass, without response. If someone speaks over you repeatedly, and nothing changes, a pattern forms, not because you deserve it, not because you're weak, but because the relationship's nervous system has adapted to your silence, and silence is often misread. It's interpreted as agreement, or acceptance, or permission. Over time, this creates a quiet cost. You start preparing less, sharing less, offering fewer opinions, not because you don't have them, but because your body learned they won't land. And little by little, your voice gets smaller, inside your own mind. This is why boundaries aren't about other people. They're about preserving your sense of self. Let me ask you something. Can you think of one person who interrupts you consistently? Notice how long that's been happening. Weeks, months, years. Patterns don't start big. They start small. One interruption you ignore, then another, and eventually, your voice occupies less space, without anyone ever naming it. This is why waiting too long to set a boundary actually creates more tension, not less, because resentment builds quietly, and when it finally comes out, it often comes out emotionally. That's when people say, "Why is this such a big deal now?" But it didn't start now. It started the first time your voice disappeared. Here's the key shift. Boundaries are not punishments. They're information. They tell other people how to interact with you in a way that keeps the relationship stable. And the earlier that information is given, the calmer everything stays. Let me be very clear about something. Being calm does not mean being silent. Being kind does not mean being invisible. And being emotionally intelligent does not mean absorbing disrespect. When you respond early, clearly, and without hostility, you prevent escalation. You don't create conflict. You reduce it. And if someone respects you, they will adjust. If they don't adjust, that information is valuable too, because it tells you something important about the role they expect you to play. Now, in the next part, I'm going to give you a simple system you can use in real life, work, family, relationships, so you always know what to do, without overthinking in the moment. And I'll also share the one sentence that stops chronic interrupters when nothing else has worked. Now let's make this practical. Because in the moment, you don't want to analyze. You want clarity. So here's a simple system you can rely on. When someone talks over you, 3 levels. Easy to remember. Easy to apply. Level 1. You stay steady. You keep speaking at the same pace. Same tone. Same rhythm. You don't rush to finish. You don't raise your voice. Most of the time, this alone is enough. The interruption loses momentum. The room adjusts. Your presence holds. But sometimes, it doesn't stop. That's when you move to level 2. Level 2. You say the person's name. Then you name the behavior. Calmly. For example, Mark, When you talk over me, I can't finish my point. Jessica, I need to complete this sentence. You're not asking permission. You're directing the flow. And then you continue. Now, if the behavior still continues, you move to level 3. This is where many women hesitate, not because it's wrong, but because they were taught to avoid discomfort. Level 3. You introduce a consequence. Not a threat, not a punishment, a boundary. You say something like, I'm happy to continue this conversation when I'm not being interrupted. And then, you pause. You stop speaking. You create silence. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't negotiate your right to finish a sentence. Silence, in this moment, is not withdrawal. It's structure. Let me ask you something. Can you feel how different this is? From storming off, or shutting down emotionally. You're not leaving the conversation. You're regulating it. Now, here's the sentence I promised you earlier. This is for people who interrupt you repeatedly, even after you've been clear. Say this calmly. I'm going to stop here, until I'm allowed to finish a sentence. Then you stop. That sentence works, because it exposes the pattern, without attacking the person. It brings everything into the open. And for anyone who wants to be seen as reasonable, it creates immediate awareness. Now pause for a moment. Which level do you usually skip? Do you rush straight to silence? Do you avoid consequences? Do you doubt yourself right before level 3? Because the level you avoid is often the one that would change the pattern. In the final part, we're going to talk about how to retrain your nervous system so you don't freeze, rush, or over-explain, especially if this has been happening for years. And we'll close with a mindset shift that turns calm into real authority. If being interrupted hits you deeply, it's rarely just about this one conversation. It's often about what your body remembers, not as a clear memory, but as a pattern. Your brain is constantly predicting what will happen next. And if it learned over time that speaking up leads to dismissal, it prepares you for that outcome. That preparation shows up as tension, as silence, as apologizing for having a voice. So the work now is not to become louder. It's to retrain your nervous system, to stay present. And that happens through repetition, not motivation. Choose one sentence from today. Just one. Let me finish. One moment, I'm not done. I'll continue when I'm not being interrupted. Say it out loud once a day, in a calm tone, even when no one is around. Then visualize a real situation, a meeting, a family conversation, a discussion with your partner. Picture yourself staying steady, breathing slowly, saying the sentence without rushing. This isn't pretending. This is rehearsal. And rehearsal reduces stress responses. Each time you imagine yourself responding differently, your brain begins to form a new pathway. That's neuroplasticity. Over time, your default response changes, not because you forced confidence, but because your nervous system learned safety. Now let me ask you something important. What would change in your life if you stopped abandoning your sentence halfway through? If you stopped shrinking your point to keep others comfortable? If you trusted that your voice doesn't need permission to exist? And if, as you're listening to this, you feel like you want to go deeper into this process, if you want practical tools to help you regulate your emotions, build inner stability, and develop emotional mastery at your own pace, I created a guide specifically for that. It was designed to help you move out of survival mode and into a more balanced, grounded way of living. You'll find the guide in the first pinned comment below. Now, before anything else, if this kind of content supports you, if it helps you feel more centered and clear, subscribe to the channel. This channel is for women who are done disappearing in conversations and ready to build calm, real authority from the inside out. Leave a comment with the sentence you're going to use next time. Writing it once increases the chance you'll remember it. And share this with someone who keeps shrinking in conversations and blaming herself for it. Here's the final truth I want you to carry with you. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. Often, they're the least regulated. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to humiliate to be respected. And you don't need to compete to deserve space in a conversation. Calm is not weakness. Calm is control. Calm is clarity. Calm is authority. And the next time someone talks over you, Remember this. Presence is not something you fight for. Presence is something you sustain. I'll see you in the next episode.